and welcome to the Game of Growth podcast. My name is Dr. Miles Cassidy-Rice.
And I'm John Cassidy-Rice. And obviously we're related. This is my son, Dr. Miles.
And this is my father, John.
And we laugh a lot.
So the way that we will start our podcast every week is we'll kind of go over the wins of the week. Now, this is a concept that I've used with many of the teams that I've worked with, both in a coaching role and also as a mental performance consultant. And I find that it's a good way to get us talking about the positives of what's happening, which is quite a key part of positive psychology, as we're wanting to see more of those positives that are happening in our life. So a win of the week can be something big that's happened during the week, such as getting a new job, buying a new car, or it could be something small, something as simple as getting out of bed every day on time.
That's me. I'm just getting out of bed.
So we know your win of the week now.
Can I have another one?
Okay. So I'll let John take the first one. What was your win of the week this week?
Wow. I've got to say this. You calling me John is really strange. So we'll see if we can get used to it. We might refer to me as Dad at some point. Well, yesterday we had a barbecue and the grandchildren were there, Kit and Keo, and had a lovely time playing with them. So that was my win of the week.
Okay, my win of the week was, you may know my brother Josh. Hopefully you know my brother Josh.
I know him.
For the audience, my brother Josh. We went to play football, and that's soccer for my American friends, on Friday. And he nutmegged me early on in the game. We were on opposite teams. So he put the ball through my legs, which he felt was a big victory. So a little bit later on in the game, a ball came over the top over him, and I took a really nice touch that took him out of the game, and he was really annoyed about it. So that's my win of the week.
They've always been competitive, those two. Really have. So taking people out is your win of the week. Is that what you're saying?
So in the context of football, taking someone out is...
Or you beat soccer.
Okay, now you're going to throw me out. So it means you've taken them out of position. So
okay, not taking them out as an assassin.
You've moved them away from a defensive position, so that you've created space for yourself.
Oh, I had a different image in my head.
And again, father. So.
Father, that's rather formal. Right, so why is this podcast loosely based around positive psychology?
So we chose positive psychology because it's a concept that can be applied throughout life, really. It's about human performance and flourishing and well-being, really. So in modern day and age, well-being is obviously a big topic. We want to encourage well-being whenever we're working. So positive psychology is a tool and a scientific thought of school that we can apply in many different ways to support our well-being.
So we're not saying negative emotions are bad. They're just part of life, but can overwhelm us sometimes. And with a positive frame of mind, can make a difference. And research backs that up.
Yeah, so we know from research that typically we're negatively inclined. It's very easy as humans for us to think about what's going wrong in our life, pick out what weaknesses there might be, just really focusing on all the small details that are going wrong.
So what do you think that might be? Why would we naturally want to focus on things going wrong?
Well, it's thought that this might be from an evolutionary process when we were out there in the wild. Not that I've ever really been in that situation, but it's thought that these negative emotions would create a behavioural response that would aid us in those moments.
So if there's a saber-toothed tiger in the area, it's better to be wary and cautious. So we're always looking for danger. So we're not going to be eaten.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, okay. That makes sense.
And as we've kind of grown in society and moved up that food chain per se, these behaviours have continued to happen. So if you think about modern examples, it could be you're walking down a street at night, it's quite dark.
What?
Might elicit the same kind of emotions. So again, that's eliciting some behavioural responses from you that might be suitable for that situation.
Especially if there's footsteps coming behind you slowly.
Yeah.
That's a totally different scenario.
Well, that would definitely trigger some behavioural response and some negative emotions, I'm sure.
So your background really is sports.
Yeah, so my background growing up, as my dad will tell you, was being dragged along to many football games.
That's me being dragged along, not I wasn't forcing him to do it.
Yeah, I was the one dragging. He was the driver, right? I was too young to drive, so I needed him for his car.
I see.
And I've always been passionate about the sport arena and always wanted to be involved in sport in some capacity. So as I grew up and transitioned from playing, I looked at different career options, and a big part of me has always loved being very academically inclined, I guess you could say. And I knew that I wanted to continue my education. So alongside some coaching, I've been working on sport and performance psychology degrees. So recently completed that process last September in 2023. And I'm now a certified mental performance consultant. So work heavily within the sporting environment, but then also a little bit in business, but you've worked a lot in business. So.
I have. And I'm very proud of him. I really am. So. Yeah, so I've spent the last 25 years plus running a training company and going around the world training essentially communication skills within business, personal, worked with various different therapies. So what we're hoping to do is kind of bring all this together and create engaging conversations.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of crossover between what applies into sports and what applies into business. Modern sports could be argued that is a huge business. So
It's absolutely a huge business.
So yeah, we're gonna bring together our expertise and have some interesting conversations around application of positive psychology techniques and progress and see where this evolves.
Right. So you've said research a few times now. So let's actually quote some research. So what model are we going to look at?
So today we'll introduce positive psychology and start to have a look at its founding fathers and how it's developed. So the biggest name within positive psychology is Martin Seligman. He's kind of considered the father of the field, and it really came from him looking at psychology a little bit different. So you think about traditional schools of thought within psychology, cognitive behavior theory. Typically they look at what's going wrong in an individual.
And that's vital. So
yeah.
We also want to understand what's going well in someone.
Yeah, so Martin Seligman came along and argued that if you're just looking at what's wrong with someone, you're ever only going to really reach a neutral point. You're going to get them to a point where you've maybe fixed what's going wrong, but they're never really going to move past that. So he wanted to change that thought and challenge that process within psychology. And what positive psychology does is we're looking at what's wrong. We want to acknowledge that, first of all, we're not in a dream landscape where everything's great and we're just thinking about the positive.
I am.
Okay, some of us
I'm in a dream landscape for sure. So.
But actually, we also want to think about moving past that 0 point and flourishing, which is a key word within the literature.
So what does flourishing mean if it's a key word?
Yeah.
Because we all kind of think we know what it means. What does it mean in the context of sports and life?
Yeah, so in general, flourishing would mean that you have meaning behind and purpose behind what you're doing, and you're utilizing your strengths to the fullest. So you're able to direct your attention and direct your strengths towards something that provides meaning within your life.
So that gives the cue into the model that we're exploring.
Yeah, so the model that Martin Seligman has heavily used within the positive psychology field is called the Perma model. So Perma stands for a few different sections. So we've got the positive emotions, we've got engagement, relationships, meaning, and accomplishments.
Which is a lot to do with life. Yes. We also have that written off screen, haven't we? So we can see.
You're not supposed to tell them.
Oh, okay. Give it away the secrets now. So let's take positive emotion. So because we've already touched upon that a little bit. So what's the difference between an okay emotion and a positive? What is a positive emotion?
Yeah, so good question. So a positive emotion...
Thank you. I'll do my best.
I'll try not to compliment you anymore.
No, I need all the compliments I can get.
Okay, so positive emotions are those emotions that elicit a good response from you. So that would be joy, happiness, excitement, those emotions that we make us feel good about ourselves.
So fundamentally, what is an emotion? Because it's kind of a chemical reaction. So what emotions doing for us as humans?
Yeah, so whenever you're appraising a situation, so whenever you're kind of processing what's going on, part of that process in your brain is going through emotions, or it is creating an emotional response within your brain as well.
So is it the visceral system that we have? So it's an electrical chemical sort of trigger that is a signal that something's happening. Would that be a fair estimate, or am I just making words up and just speaking now? Just because I haven't said anything for a while.
Okay. No, yeah. So it is those chemical responses in the brain. So the interesting thing about emotions is that response happens simultaneously alongside you actually appraising that situation. So you're figuring out what's going on. So typically, you don't have a lot of control over those initial emotional responses. So if it's a negative situation, it's probably going to be an initial negative response. If it's a positive situation, it's probably initially going to be a positive emotional response. Now, the idea behind this theory is, are we able to acknowledge and catch those negative responses quicker, those negative emotions, and actually be able to do something? Can we reprocess that situation into a more positive manner?
Yeah, so because they're only signals, and they're probably a bit more than only signals. If they're only signals, I'm guessing then one of the things that to take in mind is that something's happened, and we've got a response to it, and is it appropriate response? Because sometimes a negative emotion is the appropriate response, but sometimes it's habitual.
Yeah.
So have you got an example of, and I'm putting you on the spot here, an example of a situation where you help somebody turn around from a initial negative emotion to a positive emotion?
Yeah, so a lot of the work that I do with athletes is looking at appraising those situations and what's the reality of those situations. Like you mentioned, sometimes we just don't have the same emotional response that might fit into that situation.
Okay.
And this happens with athletes a lot. So you might have an athlete who has not been having a very good game. The coach or the manager decides to substitute them, and then they get very angry. And
yeah, I've seen that. Not from you.
That's because I was a goalkeeper, so I was never subbed that. But maybe that doesn't actually fit into that situation, right? If we actually appraise that situation correctly, the best option for the team might be to change up tactics. Again, if we're working within a sport, especially team sports, we want to be exhibiting behaviors that are appropriate for the team and pushing that team to drive to their best. And sometimes that situation of you being substituted might be appropriate for that team to be successful in that moment. Especially if we look at elite sports, we see that all the time, right? There's a lot of demands on them to be successful in those performance environments. So sometimes being a substitute is maybe beneficial for that team. Yeah. So when I'm working with an athlete, first of all, we look at identifying those key factors in that environment and just starting to think about, okay, what is actually the reality of this situation, and trying to start reappraising what's happening. And so in this situation, it might be that I'm helping the athlete look at their performance during the game, how important that game is, what the team needs to achieve in that situation itself, so that in those situations, if they're being substituted because they're performing poorly, they can start to rationalize that and think, okay, I can see that I'm not performing up to my best today. My team needs a result here. Maybe my teammate coming on will push the team to be more successful today.
So there's two things I take away from what you said there. One is that actually there's some preparation work before all this happens and put into what can be a negative situation. And now I've forgotten what my situation was. But also it's there's danger of feeling like when something goes wrong that you failed. And actually failure is a learning tool. So it's what you take away from that, which was my second point. So I did remember it. So I failed and then I recovered.
Yeah, and a big part of this process as well is, as obviously we mentioned strengths already, and and that might be that in this game the athlete was not utilizing their strengths or weren't able to utilize their strengths. And again, we're thinking about this as we're working towards a team in this example. So that might be an acknowledgement of the coach as well, that, okay, maybe I did not set up this team correctly today to utilize their strengths. So there's different ways of rationalizing this situation. We can be a little bit vulnerable. I don't think we're vulnerable enough in sport at times, and except when we're not performing up to our standards, but we can actually reappraise those situations to try and mitigate some of those negative emotions that might come from those situations.
So I'm working with a company at the moment that's a flat structure, so they have no hierarchy there. And the idea is that they want to encourage people to feel confident enough to fail and share those ideas. And what they're discovering is that people coming from traditional structured organisations don't want to be found out of what's so-called failing at something or doing something wrong, so they kind of want to hide it and feel penalised for it.
Yeah.
And yet, actually, there's a big opportunity to learn from that.
Yeah, and that definitely ties into this idea of vulnerability, right?
It does. My job is to see if I can put him off while he's speaking.
And it's working. Yeah, I've lost my trail of thought now.
So vulnerabilities.
Okay, so vulnerability. We're getting a little bit off track from the Perma model here. But when we're in these situations, negative emotions might stem from the fact that we don't want to experience guilt or disappointment that we've let the team down or we've done something wrong. But actually we could reappraise that situation, look at what's gone wrong, and be vulnerable in those situations to then share that with the team. And ideally we have a supportive environment around us where you accept or you share that information to a positive community, and they're able to support you through that time and try and elicit some positive emotions to change that situation for you, so that you can accept that a little bit easier than hiding it and trying to just deal with those negative emotions on your own.
Yes. Well, we set off with a plan of what we're going to cover today, and we really haven't covered half of what we expected to do. So let's see if we can recap. So we started off with this idea of small wins, and there could be big wins or small wins, and how important they are to actually acknowledge. And we shared a couple of small wins. One was taking out his brother. Not taking him out. And then we moved on to look at, I'm going to hand it over to you because my mind's gone blank.
So then we introduced positive psychology.
Yes,
we looked at this idea of flourishing, the strengths, meaning, and direction towards your life.
And then we were just about to go into the Perma model. We actually said it. And then we went off on this other tangent about emotions.
We did.
And there's a whole variety of emotions, and electrical, chemical, and that we think that we are bent on towards more negative emotions naturally as humans for a safety reason. So as we scan our environment, what we're looking for is danger signals. So it would make sense that we have a predisposition, I didn't think I was going to be able to say that, to negativity, but yet positive thinking can make such a difference as well.
Yeah, and I want to highlight that it's not just positive thinking, it's grounded in reality. So we can acknowledge that negative emotions are happening, might be a negative situation, but actually we want to be able to reappraise situations, utilize our strengths to try and overcome those challenges that might come up within our environment.
And we've discovered I live in a fantasy world where I think everything's perfect. Yeah. And then we talked about vulnerability and how important vulnerability is, and that we're probably not as vulnerable as we could be in everyday life because we have this fear of being failure, fear of being wrong.
Yeah, and that's where we went off track a little bit with the vulnerability piece, but definitely an interesting topic to consider.
So we're going to be covering all these and having conversations in upcoming podcasts. So what we're looking to do is actually next time to go into the Perma model and maybe break it down into sections and actually create a series of these.
Yeah, and we want to make this digestible for you all and ensure that it's beneficial. So we'll, again, I'll be coming from a sport perspective, John will be coming from a business perspective, and we'll actually look at how you can start applying these into your setting so that you can try out some of these techniques and figure out how it works within whatever your performance domain looks like.
And if you've got any questions, do contact us, let us know, and we'll look forward to exploring positive psychology, life, sports, business, and I'll do my best to put Miles off at some point so he breaks down into the laughter and we'll keep it in.
And hit us up with your wins of the week below so that we can share in your positivity as well.
Till next time, see you soon.